There it is. The broadcast is
Hey,
live.
there we go. Okay.
Hey, we are on the internet.
How are you doing, Blake?
Hello, the internet. I'm good. Thank you. How are you doing?
Oh, it's good to see everyone after vacation. What'd you guys
Yeah,
do?
it was good. We mostly hung out around home. We did some just fun quarantine stuff. Watched a lot of Christmas movies. Um,
Nice.
Spent Christmas Day with so we kind of have a little bubble that we've been quarantining with. So we went to my dad's for Christmas Day, and then went down to my mother-in-law's for a few days after Christmas.
Yeah, nice.
That was good. It's
Yeah.
good to see
Well,
family.
I actually traveled to see family because
That's right.
my kids have already had COVID and my parents have already had COVID.
Well, hey,
So it
then
ended up
bring it on.
being good for me to go out and see them now because I wasn't going to be getting anything from them. So we have a farm out in Missouri, and we all
Fun.
hang out there
Oh, that's
and
awesome.
celebrated together. I also got to see my brother and his family in Florida.
Fantastic.
Gosh, I miss everybody so much. Ah,
My face is so obscured by my gear. I feel so
yeah.
weird. Is this
Well, I
better?
like the arm that's coming out of your head.
Yeah, I'm slowly
It's
becoming
very,
a robot. This
it's
is
very
my
Borg-like.
my
Very
arm,
Borg-like.
my head attachment, my camera. This
I
is
feel like saying resistance is futile.
absolutely.
Uh,
Um,
anyway, we have an exciting topic today.
we sure do. And exciting and hopefully very enlightening. Uh,
Yeah,
Enlightening, is that right? I
yeah,
guess.
yeah. Good word.
Um,
Good word.
cool. Well, yeah. So the topic that we're gonna discuss today is gain and gain structure and how to set that properly on primarily your mixing device. But we'll kind of run through a basic gain structure model and give some helpful pointers as to kind of how to do that and what you're looking for and what you're aiming for when you're setting your gain on your devices for your shows or your broadcasts or your podcasts or your live streams to Facebook and YouTube, whatever it may be.
Yeah, and some
It's one
people are
that's
probably
important.
thinking, is this super important? Do we really need to be doing this? Is it really going to affect how I
Absolutely.
sound? Absolutely.
It is
I
absolutely
actually,
important.
I actually had a band come to me, and they said their fans, all they heard out of they're a band that runs sound for themselves, but their fans were just hearing distortion out of the speakers. They were hearing
No
all
good.
sorts of problems. They couldn't get any more volume out of their speakers.
Yep.
And the reason was their gain structure was not correct.
It's
So I
bad. Yeah.
started from the very beginning with them,
Mhm.
and we corrected their gain structure, and it made them sound good. So I'm
I bet
really
it helped a
excited.
lot. Yeah. It's one thing that if you do it correctly in the beginning, it really can help you in strides, throughout the rest of your process, the rest of your mix, whatever it is.
Absolutely.
So yeah, well, with that then, let's start from the beginning. Let's go ahead and get into this, shall we?
We shall.
I do have a few supplementary slides that I can throw up here while we get into this. Let's first kind of just establish what gain and gain structure is. I'm going to share my screen here. There we go. Can everybody see that? All right.
Yep.
So this is just a kind of an crude example of a setup for a live event. So you've got your band, you got your musicians or whatever your sound sources are. Those are all going to be connected into a mixing console. And the mixing console is going to mix all those different sound sources together, and then it's going to output that mix to some loudspeakers so your audience can hear everything, right? So gain structure is the art of properly setting the gain level for all gain stages in a sound system relative to each other, in order to keep your mix free of noise and distortion, which we came up in your story just now. The sound was very distorted, so we want to avoid that. We also want to avoid unpleasant noises and things like that. So yes, properly setting gain structure is going to really help with both of those things and clean up your overall sound. Cool. Let's dive a little bit deeper. So what are gain stages? What is gain structure and what are gain stages? I'm going to go one more slide. So from the most basic standpoint, gain itself is simply the input signal to output signal ratio. More generally, it's any time that you can raise or lower a signal, you're dealing with the gain of that signal. And so a gain stage would be a point in the signal flow at which you can make those changes to the signal. So any point in your signal chain that you can either raise the gain or lower the gain, that is a gain stage. And if you look at our example signal chain there, all of these things that are circled now, each one of those points is a separate gain stage. So you have your input, so the signal first enters your mixer or whatever the device is through an input. You're probably going to have a gain or a trim setting there. Then it's going to probably pass through some EQ. An EQ has several gain stages without it because it allows you to lower and raise gain at certain frequency bands. Then you have your dynamic section, which is going to be a compressor and maybe a gate, or maybe both. Each of those are considered gain stages because you have the ability to make adjustments to the gain at that point in the signal. Then you have your signal fader or your channel fader, right? Yeah. That its only job is to raise and lower the signal. So you're adjusting the gain at that point. And then you kind of send it out to your outputs from that point, and you have your output level. So you have your main output on a mixer, and maybe if it's going to an aux, you have your output level for each of your aux sends and things like that. So that is another gain stage. And all of those are just within a mixer. You know, from there, the signal might go to an amplifier or to a powered loudspeaker. That's going to be another gain stage. So just kind of think of it as a gain stage as any point within your signal chain where you're adjusting the level of that signal.
Turning it up or turning down.
That's it. Yep. So there we go. So that is that. And there we have it again. So after we kind of understand those concepts, gain structure or setting gain structure is the art of properly setting the gain level for all of your gain stages within a sound system, all relative to each other, with the goal being to keep your mix free of noise and distortion. And we've got another slide here. Here's just a basic representation of an audio signal. And we've got our red line there representing 0 dB or unity. Now, if you take that signal and put it in the context of a gain stage, let's say we're talking about our input on a mixer. So here's the signal entering our mixing console through an input. A couple of things that we need to be aware of in terms of setting our gain stage properly. A couple of things that we want to avoid, the first of which is noise. So I'm sure everyone that does ever listen to an amplified sound has, you're familiar with what noise is, and it is basically inherent to any electronic device. Everything has noise. Now, hopefully, your mixer or whatever your input is has a pretty decent preamp, and a good preamp is going to, one of the things that kind of distinguishes a quality preamp is it is going to automatically cut down on a lot of that noise for you. But it's always going to be there. You're never going to be able to eliminate it completely. So you've got your noise down at the very, very bottom of your spectrum there. And the idea is, first of all, to raise your signal up so that you have enough volume so you're hearing most of the leader signal, and it is kind of drowning out all of that noise. You're not really hearing a lot of the noise once you got it up to your kind of nominal operating level. And I'll throw that line up there. We'll call this our nominal operating range, or the sweet spot. That's kind of what we're aiming for here. So you can see that is, in relationship to the overall signal, that is a pretty significant way above our noise floor, right? That line came in early. We'll get back to that line. Up at the top, we have clipping.
The bad boy clipping.
We don't want clipping. So if you notice the graph here, we have the bottom and the top. Those are the two areas we want to avoid. Down at the bottom, we have the noise. So we need to get the signal well above the noise, so we're not really hearing a lot of that. But if we go too far, if we're scraping the ceiling, that's where we get clipping, and clipping equals distortion. If you're heavily clipping your inputs, it is going to, that's where that distorted sound comes in. And if you're clipping your input, you're going to clip for the rest of your signal chain. So setting your preamp on your mixer, your very first signal input, getting that level set correctly is paramount.
Super important.
Yeah. So there we go. And then here we've got some headroom there. So what that yellow line is essentially representing is sort of more or less the target line. So we have our green line and our yellow line. Either of those lines or anywhere in between those lines would more or less be what you're aiming for in your gain structure. And then everything above our normal operating range in between the point of clipping is what we call headroom. So you do want to allow a little bit of headroom kind of wherever you get to. And we'll put this into context in just a minute. Well, I'm actually going to walk through this on the mixer so you can see what it looks like on a channel meter. But just to build a little bit of context behind all this, I wanted to show you this graph here. So the goal would be more or less that green line. The yellow line would also be acceptable. But essentially you want to kind of give yourself a healthy amount of signal above the noise floor without hitting the clipping, but you still want to give yourself a nice cushion in between where you're set and the point of clipping. So you don't want, you don't want to turn it all the way up until just under the line of clipping. You still want to have a fair amount of space there. And that is just to compensate for potential spikes in the signal. Dynamic audio can be, what's the word I'm looking for? Oh, yeah, that came in way late. Like I got another one. What's the word I'm looking for? It can be unpredictable. So you want to give yourself a little cushion, I would say. That's what headroom is. You can think of it as a cushion. So to kind of just make sure that you're not going to clip at any point. You're still got a nice healthy signal, but we're not ever going to reach the point of clipping, hopefully. A couple of other points on the graph here is the dynamic range, which is basically the entire area, the entire width of the signal in between the noise and the clipping. We call that the dynamic range because that is the range in which we want to be operating within, right? We don't want to be down in the noise and we don't want to be up in the clipping. So that whole area is our dynamic range. And the signal to noise ratio, this is a term that you probably have heard before, or you might come across this term if you've ever looked at a spec sheet for any piece of audio equipment. And essentially all that is referring to is the ratio of signal to the amount of that background noise we talked about. So a healthy signal to noise ratio is going to be a high number. So the higher the signal to noise ratio, the better your sound is going to be, because the more signal you're going to have up above that noise floor. So you want to make sure that we've got a healthy level there. Cool. So
maybe you could tell us what affects the noise floor, because there are some things that you can add into the system that
there are some things. So
affect the noise floor.
It's basically the circuitry of electronic audio devices. So any electronic device that is creating or handling an audio signal, is going to have its own noise that it kind of just puts into the signal. So you have, your starting point would be if I go back a little bit, let's kind of back up. Oh, that didn't help me as much as I wanted. Okay, well, think of your first thing, you have maybe a microphone or a guitar or an instrument or something like that. So that's going to have a little bit of noise. You're going to plug that cable into that, and you're going to send that to a mixer, or maybe a DI and then a mixer. So your mixer, the circuitry of that input is going to add a little bit of noise in and of itself. If you had additional outboard gear, let's say you're working with kind of older analog equipment, and maybe you have an effects rack or a processing rack, so you have external compression, external EQs and effects and things like that. Every piece of physical device you add into your signal is going to inject its own amount of noise. So one of the things that you can do immediately to cut down on this noise, and it is all cumulative. So the more pieces of physical equipment you have in your signal chain, the more noise you're going to just kind of build.
So every input you add and every piece of gear you add.
Yes. Adds a little bit of noise. And so the easiest way to cut down on noise is to cut down on the amount of physical equipment you have. And the great thing about a lot of digital equipment today, digital mixers in particular, is they eliminate the need to have a lot of that outboard gear, like your processing, your compression, your EQs, your effects. All of that stuff is now digitally inside that mixer. So it's one piece of equipment that handles all of that. And so that is just one stage of the noise floor. And from there, maybe you go to an amplifier, and that's it. And so you just only have those two devices that are adding that little bit of noise, and that makes it much easier to deal with that and to get an overall healthy signal to noise ratio.
Yeah.
So there you go. I think I'm ready to punch back to my live camera. What do you think, Golden? You have anything else to kind of add to
Hey,
this?
there you are.
Here I am. Cool. So now that we have a little bit of background, a little bit of context, I'm going to go to my other camera view that's coming out of my cyborg head here. There it is. And here's my trusty TouchMix 16. So let's talk a little bit. I can put myself in the corner there. We don't need to see those buttons. I'm way more important. Let's go ahead and I'm going to just walk you through a gain setup here. And we're just going to simply use my microphone. Here's the microphone that I'm speaking in currently. I've got it in input 3 right there, and you can see my channel 3 right there. So as I'm talking into this microphone, you can see the signal level on the meter there on my channel. And it's got a pretty consistent level here. And you can notice right now, there we go. It is hovering right around the unity tick mark for the most part, with the highest peaks of my signal just punching into the yellow, and that is exactly what you want. That is what that was how you can kind of correlate, what your signal looks like on the meter, the channel meter here, to the graph I showed you, in terms of noise and clipping and headroom and all that. So I'm going to turn this down real quick, and my voice is going to go away momentarily, but I'll be back, I promise. If I were to turn this all the way down,
You can see he's talking and his meter, his signal level has disappeared. And he's going to bring it back up, and
as I turn this up, you can see
there comes his signal.
now I've got it at about 60%. You can see my meter here. Now it's starting to get some activity on it. You can probably hear my voice starting to come alive. And I get this thing all the way up, and there's my healthy level there.
Yep.
So for this particular microphone, I did need to get my preamp all the way up. So I'm maxing this out. And then additionally, what I've done, because actually when I first set this up, this actually wasn't enough. When I turned this guy all the way up, I still wasn't quite hitting this level where I wanted to. I wasn't quite punching into the yellow on my peaks, and that's really where you want it. And if you look at what that is, whoops, I'm changing channel banks here. If I were to actually clip this, you would see the signal hit red up at the very top, indicating clipping. So red is bad. Red means clip, stop. We don't want that. Yellow, kind of the reason why I had that yellow line, the green and the yellow line on my graph before, is to correlate that to our meter. Green obviously is nice and healthy, and it's going to be green all the way up until the point of our unity mark. And then anything above unity before clipping is going to be yellow. So having that nice yellow in there is what you want to aim for here. And for me to get myself into that level, like I said, with this wasn't quite enough. On the TouchMix here, I can actually, oh, that's where it is. I reset it. I thought I was having to talk a little harder to get myself in the clip. I added a little bit of digital gain on top of that. There we go. So you do have plus or minus 15 dB of digital gain in every channel here. So your first stage here is your analog trim knob. So this is the analog preamp that correlates to the input here. So you use that first. You want to get that up. And then if you find, depending on what your source is, what you've got plugged in, everything's going to have slightly varied signal levels coming into your mixer. In my case, I had to crank that thing all the way up just to get myself kind of going here. And then I wasn't quite satisfied with that. So I came into the input, the setup here of the input, and I gave myself just a few more dB on the digital gain. And that's just an additional gain stage after the preamp level that allows you for plus or minus 15 dB. I'm going to stop talking and run that range. Go. So you get my plus or minus 15 dB. And for the most part, when we're setting gain stage, the positive, the additional 15 dB is going to be the most helpful. The reason that we have it also dip into the negative, where it allows you to take away 15 dB, is primarily for gain recording purposes. So our analog trim knobs here, you cannot save those settings if you were to save a scene. They are, it's a physical trim pot. It's not a motorized trim pot, so you cannot record your potentiometer positions there. The digital gain, however, does get recorded. So if you want to record all of your gain settings and save that in a scene, the best option would be to actually just keep all of your physical trim knobs set to a nominal level, like straight up and down, noon, or maybe 1 o'clock on the dial there, and set them all the same. I'm not going to do that because I'm actually using a couple of these here. But you'd set everything you're using all the same, and then you make adjustments in the digital gain so that, so what per channel, you kind of come in here and you assess it at that your noon position. If it needs a little bit more, you have your digital gain and you can add more until you get it to where it needs to be. If at the straight up and down noon position, you've got too much signal coming in, well, you have 15 dB that you can attenuate that by. So
Right.
that's a really nice feature in terms of being able to record your gain settings. The digital gain is also very handy if you're mixing remotely from an iPad and you don't physically have access to the trim pots on the mixer. You're somewhere else in the venue, and you need to make some adjustments to the gain of a channel. You have that digital control on the iPad as well. And that is, for the most part, what you're looking for as far as your trim pot is concerned. And then from there, in the channel, you do have your EQ, your compressor, and then your effects, which are all going to act as separate gain stages. But they're in the digital world, since it's all built into the mixer, it's not going to have as great of an effect on the signal. You still do want to be aware anytime you're attenuating specifically. If you're adding gain anywhere in your signal chain, you just want to make sure everything is kind of balanced out in between your fader and your master output there. But that's a pretty simple process. And if you just kind of repeat that step per channel and kind of get every channel so that meter is fluctuating just into the yellow for all of your inputs, you're going to have a pretty healthy gain structure for your preamps coming into the mixer, and that's just going to really, really set you up to be able to have a nice, clean, good sound mix for the remainder of your signal chain from that point.
Right. So let's look at this now from a practical standpoint. Everything we just learned. Let's say we're running a sound check, because I do this quite a bit, and I'm running through this exact process. So let's say I'm sound checking a vocalist.
Okay.
And what I will do is make sure that the fader's down and that they're muted.
Yep.
And then I will have them start singing into the mic. I'll let them know they're not going to hear anything for a bit. And during that bit, I'm adjusting the trim pod.
That's it.
And getting their gain up to where it needs to be. And then after that, I'll unmute the channel and then bring up the fader. One thing that's important to note is if you haven't worked with a specific session before, just make sure that your monitor sends are down.
Yes.
Otherwise, they could all of a sudden go blaring through the wedges.
That just makes everybody mad.
A lot of my sessions are
that.
templates. Yeah, a lot of my sessions are templates that I've worked with before. So I'm aware of where the meter needs to sit in order to get to where it needs to be in the monitor and not, ring out in feedback.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And then one thing I notice, especially with singers, is they will often sound check at a much quieter level than they actually play at. So when I'm doing their sound check, I find where the perfect point is in the yellow space and the headroom space, but then I back it off about 3 ticks. Because I know that once they get going, they're going to start belting and it's going to change things.
So that is an example of headroom and kind of compensating for additional headroom, which is a very, very smart thing to do.
Now, my drummers tend to do that too. They don't
drummers.
Sound, when I'm doing their individual drums, they're not hitting nearly as hard. So,
just kind of feathering it.
I'm like, hit that snare like you hate me.
Yeah, let's hear what you got.
Yeah. That way I can find out where the top of my headroom is, and then I can back it off some.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So that kind of runs into, once you've got your initial gain state, kind of your gain structure set up, and from there you kind of build your mix and you start to add processing and effects and things like that. Once the event starts, maintaining that healthy gain structure is very important, because, as you said, once you're setting your levels initially, sometimes things can change. Your singer is not just quite getting there during sound check. Your drummer is just kind of not doing what he's going to do.
Amp.
Right. The amplifiers get dimed. It's just and then it throws everything off. You know, your whole gain structure is now probably close to clipping or into clipping on certain channels. So, you know, one thing to do to help compensate for that is obviously, you know, once you get those levels, bring everything down a few dBs to kind of compensate for that preemptively. Another tool that can really help with this, you know, throughout the event, however, is the gain wizard, which is a feature that is unique to TouchMix here, which is really cool. You access
the other thing that's really helpful is those mini faders at the top.
Absolutely.
If you're actually running sound out in front of the band and you're not playing an instrument, then you can just keep your eye on those mini faders.
Yeah, and what she's referring to are these guys up here. So we have our main faders here, and then up in our bank navigation buttons, each one of those has a little mini fader representation of that fader bank. And if you clip any of the channels at any time, the little mini fader representation of that channel is going to turn red.
Red, yeah.
Let's see if I can demonstrate that right now.
Clip your mic.
All right, so I clipped my channel. You probably saw the meter flash red briefly, but now more importantly is that mini fader right there is now red, telling me, okay, I've clipped that channel at some point. And that is a really, really useful thing to be able to see. My vocalist channel is clipped, my snare drum channel is chipped. I know that I need to make some adjustments there, probably compensate for something. One of the things that it doesn't tell you is when that clipping happens. So now we know, okay, we've clipped channel, we need to do something. And without the gain wizard, you could obviously kind of make an estimate.
Small little adjustment.
Yeah, just make a little adjustment, take it down to maybe 3 dB and just get back into a safe area where that's not going to happen repeatedly. There's nothing you can do about that. Once it clips, it clips. The only thing we can do moving forward is try to compensate and make sure it doesn't happen again.
I set up a clear clip button on one of my user buttons so that if it's clipping, I can just quick clear it. Yeah.
Actually, let me double check that. I change these sometimes. So user buttons, user 2. Yep, user 2 is.
If I see something clipping, I'll quick clear the clip. And then if I see it clip again, that tells me that I need to go to that analog gain and turn it down so that it's not clipping.
Right there. So I'm going to set my user 1 right now for the clear clip option.
Love those user buttons.
They're so good. And then I hit that, and there we go. That has cleared my indicator there. So now I've reset the indicator essentially. So if clipping happens again, now I will get a fresh clip indication.
So that's if you're the person in front of house, running from perhaps an iPad. You can look at those mini faders, and that will tell you the story. But let's say, like in the story of the band that I was working with, fixing their gain staging, the drummer is the person who's running sound for the band. And he obviously cannot concentrate on the mini faders. So there is a really excellent tool in here that will let him monitor those levels.
If we go into hit the wizard button here, we have our gain wizard.
Gain wizard, it's
there we
cool.
Go. Look at that.
Yeah.
So that's showing my nice clip on my mic channel there. What this is essentially is a little bit more. They're still clip indicators, but they're a little bit more dynamic. And they measure clipping over time, more or less, instead of just a static clip incidence. And that allows them to produce a tiered indicator of clipping. So you have 4 LEDs per input here. And each LED represents 3 dB of clipping. So if all 4 LEDs are illuminated on a channel, that means that you've got at least 12 dB of clipping on that channel, and that is too much. You don't want that. And this actually correlates to the tick marks around your trim pot there. So all of these tick marks represent 3 dB of change. So if I clip my channel, I come in here, I say, okay, so I've got 4 LEDs illuminated. I can go on that dial, I can go back 4 tick marks, and I know I've compensated for that 12 dB of clipping. And then I can reset the wizard there, and I'm good. And I should be good to go. I should have
basically the mixer is watching those meters for you.
Exactly.
It's awesome.
Yes, it's automated. It's keeping its eye out for you, so that you can come into this screen. Oh man, I've clipped. I've got some pretty heavy clipping there. I'm going to make a few tweaks.
The drummer between songs could quick take a look at his effects wizard and make those quick adjustments, and then go back to playing.
Yes. pretty cool.
Yeah.
Something else that we should actually talk about are instruments that might have their own volume control, such as keyboards. 'Cause that presents a whole new dynamic to your gain structure, because now this player, it's not just a static input coming into your mixer. That person has their own control over their instrument, and so at any time they can be adjusting that on their end, which might make it a little bit more difficult for you to kind of maintain that healthy level in your mixer.
So it's important during sound check that you ask them to play at their loudest possible level so that you can find just under where that clipping point is.
Just under the point, yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, you want to make sure you're communicating with the musicians and make sure that they are cranked for the sound check, and so you know where that max level is, and you can kind of set that appropriately, so you're not going to ever go over. And then from there, if they want to turn themselves down, that's fine.
Yeah, one of the problems I seem to run into with keyboardists is they'll have several keyboards that are submixed into a mixer, and then they're sending those channels to me.
Yep.
And sometimes they're sending so much level that even with my trim pods all the way down, they're blowing up the channel, and that's when I have to ask them. Ask them to send me less level, and I just keep asking them to turn it down till I'm in what I call the safe zone with my headroom.
If your trims are all the way down, their lowest level, and your inputs are still clipping, if that signal in here is so hot that you're clipping those inputs, there's nothing you can do at this point. Whatever's sending you that signal, has to send you a lower level. So you got to get them to turn down. There's also things like pads that you could introduce into the signal, but
those are good things to have in your bag of tricks.
They are. It's good to kind of have a couple of those on hand. DI boxes.
Yes.
A Sharpie.
Guitar picks.
There you go. Guitar strings.
Yes. And even drumsticks.
Totally. Yep. So very, very handy to have a pad or something on hand, but really the best scenario, the best solution for clipped inputs with minimum gain is whatever's sending that signal's got to turn it down.
Yep.
So you got to communicate that.
Definitely.
Cool. Well, that I think takes care of the basics. We got through gain and gain structure and what that concept is, and we ran through kind of how to get it going, what to look for, and just kind of repeat the process. I don't think I have anything else at this point for this topic. What do you think, Golden?
Well, we've kind of went over our time. I could talk about this for
clearly
forever, but
could go for 2 more hours.
Kind of ran out of time, but we covered the main thing.
We did.
The trim pod, so
hopefully that was insightful.
For
some of you out there.
Yeah.
If there's any other topics that you'd like us to cover on these Tech Talks, we're going to be getting these going probably a couple times a month. We'll just kind of jump on live here and discuss a certain topic for 15, 20, 30 minutes. Please let us know if there's something in particular that you want to hear about, or you want to know about, that you're curious about, or that you're confused about. We're very happy to take suggestions and kind of do whatever you guys want to know, present you with the knowledge that you're looking for. If not, we'll just make it up as we go. We're happy to do that too. Cool. Well, I'll go ahead and
put your mugshot back up.
Make myself big again with my big cyborg head. Big face. Cool. Well, I think that's it then. Thanks everyone out there who tuned in and checked it out. And again, let us know. You can comment to us. You can get a hold of us through email. If you are not a part of the Facebook user group on Facebook, you should definitely check that out.
QSC TouchMix is the group. There's a group called QSC TouchMix. It's all run together. Mm-hmm. And it's a great group.
It's a great community. Golden and I frequent that daily, so it's a good way to get a hold of us and also kind of just pose questions to a whole community of people that are using the product at a multitude of levels and settings and scenarios. So cool.
Very good.
Okay. I think we did it.
Yeah, that was fun, Jason. Very cool.
That was fun. Yeah. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for everybody out there. All right. We'll see you next time.
We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.